You know, I'm one of those low energy days, so decided to do a line of coke before I hit record on the microphone here. But no, I didn't do that. I would do something so much worse. Time for your, well, it is going to be out on Wednesday, so your Wednesday Zomia ONE Underground Q&A. And you know, while I was traveling, I was reading a book. It was a very, very interesting book. I read as often as I can. And we got a great tech question to get into. Actually, basically this is going to be all tech questions. Been a little while since we've had all tech questions. I'm going to open up talking about, well, kind of a quasi-tech and entertainment question, but, anyway. But this book I was reading, I want to tell you about this. So it's the 90th anniversary edition, and it just came out this year, 2019. So that tells you how old it is. But it's This Ugly Civilization by Ralph Borsatti. You read a book like this, and you can't, again, it's the 90th anniversary, so it was 1919, but 1929, I guess. So this would come out just before the Great Depression, or, thereabouts. You read books like this, and you really do realize, that there's, like the old saying goes, there's nothing new under the sun. I'm far from completing it because it's a huge book. But, it goes to show how little things have changed. But also that, so many of these ideas, one of the things that pissed me off, in fact, I got a few people who emailed me. They were surprised that I have the Free State Project as a sponsor. I do, I moved to New Hampshire for it. So, again, I don't mind, at all. There are certainly plenty of people, not so many people that have come to New Hampshire, that I think are as much of a problem. There are a lot of people that come to like PorcFest or to, Liberty Forum that I think are absolutely full of shit, but they come there acting like they have some new idea, like they have the path to freedom, into a free society and all this crap. Most of these people are frankly full of shit, and that's why they don't even move to New Hampshire in the first place. They just come and visit the events, and I don't know what the hell, they hope to sell a few copies of their book or something like this. But they're really full of shit. They're like talking about holistic anarchy or holistic freedom or some nonsense. And not that it's necessarily that their ideas are nonsense, but the fact that they play it off like it's a new idea. This is what they came up with and whatever. Even if you are doing some kind of remix or a certain synergy of, different concepts, different philosophies, different ideologies, and you're kind of balling them all up into one. There's something to be said for where a remix, there is a point where a remix does become individually identifiable, as in it becomes something that, might be so contrasting in style that if you're able to pull it off successfully and cogently, that you have come up with something that, can more easily be attributed to you. Yeah, that kind of thing can happen, but in the realm of philosophy, ideology, etc., I think it's intellectually dishonest to pretend that you've come up with something new. I personally always, look, I'm talking as somebody who for years now has been asked, and sometimes still do get asked, to come up with like my own ism, right? Like libertarianism or whatever, whatever kind of ism. And I talked about this, probably 2-3 years ago, and I did a little episode about it. You can find it if you remember the Zomia ONE Underground. I did a little episode saying, okay, this is the idea that that this is basically what I run with, but I refuse to be Elrond or be considered like any kind of, I don't even like being considered a thought leader, any kind of thing like that. So I'm not going to, I'm not interested in like, writing a book about it or doing this or blah, 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 blah. So I get really annoyed, and I go out of my way to attribute where ideas that I bring to fore come from. Okay, if it comes from Max Stirner, I say it comes from Stirner. If it's something I think comes from Ralph Borsatti, I say it comes from Borsatti. If it's something that comes from, the E Prime guys, like Alfred Korzybski, I say it comes from that. I never, ever pretend for a second that I'm coming up with something new. That doesn't mean there aren't new things, and that eventually there might be something like new that actually becomes reality and not just, a thought process that's in some book, like, say, This Ugly Civilization, even though people did really try what Borsatti laid out in that. Like the school of living, right? I would never do that. My influences, my inspirations are on my sleeve when I'm wearing sleeves. But they are on my sleeve. I am so distrustful of anybody who claims that they have the way, that they have some. I mean, look, there are quote unquote philosophers or idealists or activists or whatever over the centuries, frankly, where, I think that they got so much fucking right, but there's never anyone, not even Max Stirner, there's never anyone where I'm like, oh yeah, they got it 100%. For example, a guy like Charles Fourier, right? I think he has brilliant ideas, but then also he has shit where I don't know that he wasn't kind of like Nietzsche, where later on in his life that he wasn't just going fucking insane. And saying the craziest things like, oh, people are going to, in the future, they're going to evolve tails and they're going to like, wait, what? or all kinds of other stuff, that are just out there. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to give credit where it's due. So fuck these people who think that they have something new. But boy, I'll tell you, reading This Ugly Civilization, talk about a book, and I'm glad that it got reprinted. Talk about a book that is maybe needed more today than it was during the Great Depression. Of course, because there's a good chance we're heading for another. But such a needed book. And it still speaks so fresh to what is going on now, because I could go on and on about this. I could talk the whole episode about it. I just want to put it this way, okay? We fought, as in, I don't know what phrase I want to use for this. I don't know. Do you want to go with Western civilization? Does that make you feel good inside? Okay, let's do that. We fought so hard in America, parts of Europe, other places, for an 8-hour workday as compared to a 20-hour workday. And I'm barely kidding about that part. We have come full circle. Okay, where it's interesting because it's almost 100 years. It's almost exactly 100 years later. We have come full circle, where now we are back to basically working, hell, even more than 24 hours a day, some of us, just to survive. And that's exactly what it was like, very much at the onset of the Industrial Revolution. People talk about, oh, how great, oh, look at everything the Industrial Revolution brought us. Yeah, for some people. But then there's a whole slew of, and I know, because libertarians are like, oh, unions are so terrible. No. Do you like spending time with your family? Do you like spending time with people? Do you like having free time to play video games and all this? I mean, a lot of that, I agree, unions turned into something, or many unions turned into something far worse, and they became the very power structure that they were fighting against early on. Okay, no doubt about that. I'm not saying that, but at the time, initially, okay, and I'm very familiar with this because actually, a place where I grew up was very near the literal first union ever formed in the United States, that being in New York Mills. And it's a tremendous history, to learn about. But I mean, it's so funny. Look into the history of like the 8-hour day, and that's not something that's in Ralph Borsatti's book, even though it would certainly fit in with the narrative. But you look into the history of the 8-hour day, and I mean that was hard won. to try and you know, have some kind of free time, you know, and make a living and all this, we're basically willfully just giving that over and bullshit. All these online entrepreneurs, I know some of them that are successful, but generally they've been successful because of something they did outside of it. Okay, like maybe they were working in some kind of industry and they sold that off or whatever. The bulk of, I don't believe it. So many people are just faking it till they make it. And I'm tired of that too. You know, talking about people that are faking it, right? People who don't give intellectual credit, and then those who are, you know, just outright lying, saying that they're some kind of success, you know, when they're not. Or some kind of financial success, I should say. There's a lot of different ways to gauge success, but, you know, yeah, it's a fucking problem. And the internet, you know, makes this charade, sadly, all the more believable because you're not really there. But that speaks, I guess, somewhat to Borsati's work, who Ralph Borsati was actually a genuinely successful person who just said, like, hey, you know, this, all this shit just isn't leading to human happiness. And so, you know, he wanted to do something else. But anyway, I can't recommend this book enough. What I've read so far, I've been very impressed. This Ugly Civilization by Ralph Borsati. Now, that's not really what I wanted to open up talking about, and I didn't mean to get into that diatribe. I have other things I want to discuss here. And one of the things I want to discuss, we've been talking about. In fact, it came up in the last episode of Sovereign Tech. I think we were talking about Peacock at the beginning, which is NBC's streaming service. And we've talked about where, you know, these streaming services a lot of them are just falling away right and left. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if Hulu just became a part of Disney Plus. You can already buy it like in a package with Disney Plus and ESPN Plus or whatever, and Hulu. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, most people only buy these things in packages. Like I was talking to people who were telling me that, oh, they pay for Hulu and Spotify. They get it all in this one package that's only like $15 a month. And ironically, that's just going back to buying a cable channel package, right? Nothing changes. Oh, there is a streaming service I want to talk about that has a point. Okay, we're going to get to it. But I've railed against this point for many years on Sovereign Tech. Okay, I was there when this whole concept, and this has become a new now I think it's kind of fallen out of being a buzzword, but even just a year or two ago, it was a buzzword. And the word is cord cutter. Now, cord cut, and I've railed against this for a while because anybody that calls themselves a cord cutter isn't really a cord cutter. Okay, because the term, and I was there when it started getting used, and I mean, I guess I have Disney Plus, you know, I have some of these services, so I don't know if I could technically be that. But I am a cord cutter in reserve, meaning that I actually, you know, if the cable, whatever, if the internet got shut off, I could still enjoy everything. You know, all of the entertainment and content that I enjoy, I could still enjoy it. If I didn't have access to the internet, or I had limited access, say, to the internet, and, you know, I couldn't stream even 480p or 240, whatever, you know, I couldn't do any of that. Not a problem for me. I have, a crazy Blu-ray library, DVD library. I have digital files. I'm looking at a 12 terabyte hard drive right here that has so much fucking shit on it. My music collection is, I don't rely upon Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, anything like that. I have my own personal music collection with literally millions of songs that I, haven't even begun to chip away at as far as even listening to. Video games, I could play all those offline. No problem there. Even though I'm not I'm not a practicing cord cutter, I can easily be one because it's always in the back of my mind. Now that's the thing. That's what when cord cutting became a thing, became a term, it became a term really, I think, with when Netflix became more of a mailing service, right? It morphed into, not a Power Ranger, it morphed into a term that just meant you didn't watch cable TV anymore. Okay? But that's really bullshit, because how are you getting internet? Probably through a cable company. You know, you might be if you only watch stuff via your telco, your LTE connection to a telco, I guess then maybe you're a cord cutter, sorta. You know, like that's a little more accurate than people who just, like, people that just watch Netflix. You are not cord cutters, because how are you watching that, right? You know, and the initial, like, appeal to me, and at my time, at the time, my best friend, the appeal for us was that we wouldn't have to pay into these companies anymore. We wouldn't even have to pay for internet if we didn't want to. You know, we wouldn't pay for shit. That's cord cutting. Like, the torrent community ultimately was cord cutting. Like, we were so impassioned to build this incredible library that no one, could take content away from. And that's important. You know, something like with Disney Plus, that a lot of people aren't really talking about is that in the next few years. So it's funny, okay, and I'm sure Rob and I will talk about this on TFR. You can't watch, and I did talk about this, I think I mentioned this in one of my conversations around Disney Plus. You cannot watch Solo and The Last Jedi. Yes, I know I did bring this up. You can't watch either of those on Netflix, or I mean on Disney Plus. Those are Star Wars movies, and you have to wait until December 26th to be able to watch them on Disney Plus. I mean, is that a big deal to me? No. I have, digital copies of these things. They're not hard copies, but I have digital copies. I don't have hard copy of a lot of Star Wars stuff, just because I'm waiting for, like, the big box sets to come out. I mean, I've bought those movies so many times over. I can be a little patient, and the digital copies that I have, the MP4 files and whatever, the MKV files are fine. But anyway, there are a lot of movies that, because of previous deals that Disney did, even though Disney owns and produced and made and paid for the movies, those movies will leave Disney Plus and end up on Netflix or wherever they happen to be. I mean, that's the nature of the situation. And this is why I think it's so important to have hard copy or hard data, if you want to call it that, at all times. Because none of these services, I mean, there's no guarantee you're going to be able to access these things at any given moment. In fact, this leads to what I really wanted to talk about. Okay? And that is something that I was very supportive of, and I thought was such a great idea. I paid for it. I've paid for it for the past, as long as it has existed. I have paid for this. Okay? And really, I feel like fortunately, it didn't cost that much. It was only costing on the order of, say, $20 a year or something like that, which is far better than, some of these services you spend $20 a month on, right? But it was announced, a couple weeks ago, maybe 3-4 weeks ago, maybe about a month ago. It was announced that it was shutting down at the end of the year and was going to transfer over to being a YouTube channel. But let's talk about this for a minute, okay? And then we got a couple great tech questions to get into. This is tech 2, though. Stargate Command, okay? So the franchise Stargate. And I thought this was the coolest shit in the world. And this is basically what Disney Plus has kind of pulled off, even though they have not even gone to these lengths. And frankly, CBS All Access is the Star Trek channel as well. So, for a lot of people, I think Disney Plus would do fine on its own if it didn't have Marvel and Star Wars, right? But for a lot of people, Disney Plus is probably, either it's their Star Wars channel or it's their Marvel channel, right? Because those are, just the two, arguably the biggest running franchises out there right now. Okay. Minus, that's not talking James Bond, which saw the new trailer for that. I don't know what the fuck was in that trailer, but whatever. Was it No Time to Die? Is that I mean, clearly they're setting that up to be a bigger franchise, and they're going to give, the black gal in that, movies and everything, which hey, whatever. That's fine. I just think it would have been a lot more ballsy if she just literally was like, her name was James Bond, and just like we have in Star Trek, right? We had Michael Burnham. Clearly giving, using names that aren't genuinely attributed to different genders is a very interesting marketing ploy. And I never had a problem with the fact that Michael Burnham was called Michael Burnham. She can be called whatever. I mean, they could have called her Gary. I don't care. My problem with Michael Burnham is that she's just incessantly slack-jawed, at all times. And she's not really a character. She's just a reaction factory. So, that's what annoys me there. Anyway, whatever. We're getting off track here. So Star Wars, yeah, Disney Plus, like, that's a big deal. Now, I have wanted for a while. And when Stargate Command did this, I thought this was great. And I actually thought Star Wars was going to effectively do this with the Star Wars app. And they kind of did. But this idea of you having a app or web portal or wherever or whatever, where you would go to it, and within that you would pay whatever fee, and $20 for, I think it was supposed to be $20 every 6 months, but because it was a founder, I got to do it for like $20 a year with Stargate Command. To do that for Stargate, and you'd get SG-1, Atlantis, Stargate Universe, you get the movie, okay, but not just those. So you got to stream all of that, okay, whenever you wanted, and it wasn't going anywhere, right? Because there was no other deals, there weren't any deals on Netflix, weren't any deals over here, whatever. But it also gave you, there were shows, there were like video, what do you call them, vlogs, right? There were vlogs on there that were original to it that you can watch. There were, all these interviews. They tried to do their own series, right, with Stargate Origins, which, how you felt about that, I did a review of it, but how you felt about that is up to you. Definitely a very low budget affair, no doubts there, even though it was great to see Connor Trinneer acting again. And it did definitely retcon Stargate pretty hard, and I would almost say in an annoying way, but whatever. But also, it would later on, it would allow you to read Stargate comic books right in the app or on the website, as well as Stargate books, which are very popular still. There were some things missing, like Big Finish did a great run of SG-1 and Atlantis audio productions, like they do with Doctor Who, and they do with Blake Seven, and so on. Those, and they did with Highlander, all of which are great. And the Stargate ones, I have all of them. They're phenomenal. They didn't have those in there, but that's fine. But it was so cool. And then it had, a forum, it had a message board and everything in there. It was, if you were a Stargate fan, you would pay, you'd pay for this, but you got everything Stargate, and you had a home for Stargate, right? A place where you could go, where it's all Stargate all the time, and everything you could want out of the franchise, you could just consume it all for one fee. And it's a brilliant idea for what it is, okay, for the infrastructure we live in, right? Where we're not really cord cutters. For whatever reason, this got shut down, and they're coming up with a bunch of different reasons. They're saying, oh, well, people just don't like a paywall. And so what did, and granted, Stargate's owned by MGM ultimately, what did they decide to do? They said, well, but this is very exciting. We're going to get more people into Stargate by moving everything over to our Stargate YouTube channel. But here's the rub. It's not, that would be amazing, and it really would, if they were putting full episodes, every episode of SG-1, all the movies, all of Stargate Atlantis, all of Stargate Universe, and just plopping it all onto YouTube, and you can watch it all there for free. Because that's the argument, is that they think people don't want to be. I mean, it's marketing horseshit. Like that's just that's corporate speak. That's crap. Okay, the problem is not a paywall. I don't know what the fuck they're thinking exactly, but the problem was not the paywall. Okay. But basically, I mean, you're not going to be able to do that. All they're going to have up there are some of the original interviews. And not to say that those are bad, but you are not getting anything remotely like the incredible product that the Stargate Command streaming service was. With everything else that it had. It had the chat rooms. It had all this stuff. I mean, basically, they weren't getting the engagement clearly they weren't making money on it, right? It wasn't profitable, and so they stopped. I'll say this. I think it's unfortunate, because it's only been around for a couple of years, barely. I don't think that that's enough time to know whether or not something works. And this speaks to a much bigger issue, around monetary incentives or financial incentives to do things. But ultimately, right now, there is no quote unquote legal way to watch Stargate or, the bulk of the Stargate franchise online. Because it's not on Netflix. I mean, maybe in other countries it is. I don't know. But it's not on Netflix, not on Amazon Prime. Go down the list. They're not there. You are going to have to, either buy these things separately on Prime Video or something, which is still a possibility, I think, or whatever. But basically, MGM's greed didn't get fed. And so now, you can't, people who think that they're cord cutters can't really watch Stargate. And it might be rerunning on the Sci-Fi Channel. I don't know, or it's not even a Sci-Fi Channel on Sci-Fi, because fuck that noise. But it just goes to show, this is what happens. This is a preview, a warning of relying upon these streaming services. And let's be clear here, SG-1 especially. Okay, Atlantis and Universe were good too, but SG-1 especially is one of those shows that I think is totally rewatchable. This is in the order of, like Star Trek, the original series. Pick your big shows. I think SG-1 in 10 years, and it was for a long time, is one of the longest running, if not the longest running sci-fi show of all time. Was at one point. Doctor Who probably takes that cake now, since it rebooted. But that show went 10 years, and you cannot help but fall in love with the characters over 10 years. And genuinely, it is a great, great show. And the average person can't experience it right now because of rights and other, and because of the nature of what it costs to do these streaming services and everything. And, just MGM's overall stupidity and greed. And, it's not there. It's weirder that SG-1 is not available on modern formats. You can buy the DVD set. It costs you about $100 to get all 10 seasons. Trust me, compared to what they used to cost, I know, I was there when DVDs were the hotness. That's a steal. $100 is a fucking, that might as well cost $1. At that price, because that's how inexpensive that is for all 10 seasons. You used to have to pay $30 to $50 per season, and add that up with 10 seasons, you know what you're getting. It's weird that it was never put on Blu-ray. Probably not going to get put on 4K. I don't know. Not that I even care about that. Okay. But owning the DVDs is a good idea, because unless MGM, and I wouldn't put this past them, or any entertainment company, unless they came into your house, broke into your house, and stole your DVDs, nobody can take these things away from you. I don't know how people don't see that as the better way to spend their money than, hashing out whatever. Again, Stargate Command, it wasn't a bad price, right? $20 a year or even every 6 months. That's pretty good. Okay. But yeah, this is these streaming services. I'm glad that they're dying, that a lot of them are dying. Not all of them are going to die. Disney Plus, I think, is probably going to do great for a long, long time. But this is a very, very real issue. The part that drives me nuts too is I see this, and I watch The Mandalorian, right, on Disney Plus. That is such a great show. So fucking great. But it's very tight. It's not a large cast, and even where they are, it's not on a, they go to other planets and everything, but it's not like the grandest scale. You can do, as long as you actually have great fucking writing, a great franchise that already has a big universe built around it, which Stargate does, you can make a very, very tightly knit show for practically nothing. And you don't even need a lot of effects. You don't need a huge effects budget, and you can really make something great. But the writing's got to be that fucking good. You know, and The Mandalorian is making a mockery of much of the entertainment industry, in my opinion, with how it's delivering, what it's doing, and how it's doing it. But that's another conversation for another time. But basically, yeah, I think I think people are nuts if you're a genre fan, okay, and these streaming services, you're somehow okay with this. It blows my mind. I mean, I'm not surprised the Stargate Command shut down, but what a shame, because this was doing it right. This was everything, you know, books even, and it wasn't just the videos, everything, and now it's shut down. And it's just it's industry stupidity. I think that really led to that. There was how many people even knew that this existed? There was no marketing really around it. I don't know. Someday there's going to be a story told about this, and I would love to hear it. But what a fucking mess, and fuck these streaming services. You know, even look, Disney Plus is doing great things, but even that, fuck them. Just fuck them all. Because even Disney Plus, you can't watch all of Star Wars on there. And is that ultimately down to IP? Yeah, to some degree, but you think Disney doesn't want to protect its IP too? Don't act like I mean, you know, it's not like Disney, you know, is out there with an eye patch and a tin cup like, oh, please help me. You know, I mean, come on. They're just as bad. But anyway, it pissed me off, and it just goes to show, like, if you love this kind of stuff, you know, if you're into movies and TV shows or whatever, man, it's hard copy or hard data or bust. You know, yeah, you can go and torrent all this shit. Go ahead, of course. You know, I'm so supportive of that. Like, please do, because these people clearly don't really want to make money off of it, or they want to put in like almost the least amount of effort and hope that they do make some kind of money. I don't know. It's just so stupid. So anyway, I talked about that way longer than I expected, but let's get into a couple other tech questions here. Don't trust streaming services. I hope that message is abundantly clear. Not to say that Blu-rays don't have their problems either. There's certainly plenty of rent-seeking going on with that. But all right, here we go. This is from boy. I love this listener. I mean, she is just dynamite. So can't thank her enough. She is somebody who is one of the reasons that this show, that Sovereign Tech, still goes round and round. Okay, I want to recognize that. I keep people anonymous, but I want to recognize that. Anyway, so and I think she's been listening since probably since episode 1. I know she's been around. She's been with me for years. Just tremendous. So anyway, let's read it here. Hey Brian, I've got a Windows 7 machine that I'm finally thinking about upgrading to Windows 10, but I'd hate to give Microsoft any money. I was fucking right. I was searching around and found this article from CNET that claims that you can still do a free upgrade. I will put that article in the show notes. But anyway, reading on. Do you know if this actually works? Also, hearing you talk on episode number 351 about running Windows 10 on older machines got me worried. I have an Intel i5-2400 CPU. Will this be fast enough for Windows 10, or should I just look into getting a new computer? Thanks. No, you don't need to get a new computer. So let's break this down. So what the CNET article, this is possible. You still can, even though the window was, I think, supposed to be closed in 2016. People have found out, like Ed Bott, and actually I think Steve Gibson's even talked about this and others, that you can get if you have a Windows 7 machine, you can get a free upgrade still to Windows 10. Okay. That's still totally possible. Now, there's ways to go about this. Okay, there's points I want to bring up to you that that to use going forward when you decide to do this. Okay. To talk about your processor, let's get into that first, and then we'll talk about what everybody needs to know, of the proper way to go about this. Okay. So the i5-2400. I think that's a quad core. That's fine. I mean, I know it's older. That's like Sandy Bridge, right? Boy, the last computer that I really loved, like that I cared about and cherished and held, was it was before the 2400 because it was pre Sandy Bridge. Because Sandy Bridge is when everything Well, that's when people started raising, like, even I remember Alex Jones talking about this back in 2011, right? That, oh, Sandy Bridge computers, they have NSA spying capabilities in them and blah, blah. Oh, boy. Anyway, no, that'll do fine. From 2011, that'll do fine. The actual specs for Windows 10 are pretty low. You only need a 1 gigahertz processor, and it doesn't have to be multi-core. Okay, like at all. It doesn't have to be dual core. Doesn't have to be quad core. It only needs a gig of RAM. If you're running the 64-bit version, which Sandy Bridge is a 64-bit processor, you need 2 gig of RAM. So let's just say you need 2 gig of RAM for that. You probably want to run with at least 4, but you could get away with 2 if you needed to. You'll be fine on both counts. I'm pretty sure. You don't need to get a new computer if you don't want to. So that's not a concern. Having an older i5. But let's talk about how to do this. Okay. Because I don't think it was mentioned in the CNET article. The way you want to, if you do want to update to Windows 10, because you're not asking me whether or not you should. Like, should you go from Windows 7 to Windows 10? All right. Well, let me talk about that first for a second. Okay. In my opinion, if you are even fairly knowledgeable, okay, about computer security, and you do all the good stuff, even the simple stuff, running a VPN, using an ad blocker, keeping your software updated, your browser and everything updated regularly and all this, because the Windows 7 security patches for free that everybody has access to stops, I think, in January 2020. We talked about this, like you said, on episode 351. But at the same time, understand that Microsoft really will, like, remember when Bluekeep became a thing, even though Windows XP was well out of life cycle and they weren't offering extended security even for the fee that they're going to charge companies that want to continue to use Windows 7. They still put out a patch for Windows XP. So if there's something like that, that's that bad, Microsoft will, I think, still put out a patch for Windows 7. So if you're fairly well, you don't need to upgrade if you to some degree know what you're doing. Okay, that's my opinion on that. But yes, Windows 10, certainly it's going to keep getting those security updates, and that's great. And I could see the argument for using that. Now, if you are going to go through with this process, okay, of using Windows 10, there's a couple things I want you to do. Some have to do with the way this process that you're going to use to upgrade from Windows 7. The others have to do with, I think, how to manage it on a machine that is a little older, or that is older, but that I really think will do fine running Windows 10. And you might as well, even if you're going to buy a new computer, no need to have the other one become completely outdated. And so, go ahead and get Windows 10 installed on it. We'll talk about that in a second. All right. Well, yeah, let's comment on how to go about this process. So basically you will go to a link that will go to, where you can download, the Windows 10 image, and it'll give you the media creation tool for Windows 7. And then you can create that either USB or disk or whatever and install it. Now, here's what you want to do. You want to install it. It's going to give you a couple options when you go through this. It's going to say, do you want to do a clean install or do you want to install on top of Windows 7? Install on top of Windows 7. Do not do a clean install yet. Keyword. Because first off, you want to make sure that everything works. It should, but you want to make sure everything you have works with Windows 10, and you want to make sure that maybe there isn't some other speed issue or some snag that you run into, okay, over time. So because you'll have, 20, 30 days, whatever, wherein after you upgrade to Windows 10 that you could still roll back to Windows 7 if you do where you install over Windows 7, okay, or on top of it. Once you know that you like how Windows 10 is running on your older machine, then you can do the clean install. Because here's what happens is that, and I don't know what the time frame is for this. I don't know that it's necessarily right away, but what's amazing that people figured out with this, the fact that you can still upgrade, is that it doesn't it doesn't need a key. We're used to having to put in a license key whenever we install a new version of Windows or or a fresh copy of Windows. There's no need to do that. Okay, when Windows 10 installs, it will create a license key that will then associate that copy of Windows 10 and that key with the computer you installed it on. In this case, your i5 2400. Okay, and so it becomes attached to that computer. All right, the license key isn't going to work with any other computer that Windows 10 generates when you do this install on top of Windows 7. It's something to keep in mind. I mean, there's ways, like you can call up Microsoft. Basically, what you can do is you could call Microsoft, say, hey, I'm an OEM. I have this license key. I need it to work on another machine. And they'll either give you a new license key to put on a new machine, or, and you have to say you're an OEM. They'll understand what that means. Or they will they'll free up that license key to where you can install it on another machine. Okay, so you can cheat your way into it anyway. You just have to know what technicians know, which I happen to know, and then make it happen. But anyway, so that's how you want to do it. And so once that Windows 10 install that you put over Windows 7, again, you didn't do a clean install, you did it over Windows 7. Once you do that, then wait a week or however long to make sure everything's working. Then go ahead and, in my opinion, do a clean install. Okay, because then Windows 10 is attached to that computer, and you can clean install it all day long, and you're fine. So that's how I would go about that. Now, after you have Windows 10 installed, I would recommend, and I put a link in the show notes. Actually, I have it right here in front of me. I put a link in the show notes for a PowerShell script that you can run from GitHub that's going to clean up all the bullshit in Windows 10. It's going to get rid of as much of the tracking data metrics and setups that Windows 10 automatically has going for it. Okay. One thing also, when you're installing Windows 10, make sure you turn off that advertising ID. There are a lot of little things that you can turn off. Make sure you're doing those as you go through the install process. You don't need them. Fortunately, Cortana is not a part of the process really anymore. That's comforting. But anyway, this PowerShell script, gets rid of Candy Crush, gets rid of all the bullshit, and you just run it once and it's done. 5 minutes later and you're all set. It's really, really slick, really great. I do it every time I do an install of Windows 10. I always run this PowerShell script, so make sure you do that. That said, if it does happen to be slow on your i5 2400, I would recommend going into performance. What do you do? Right click, manage on my computer, go into performance or whatever. Or you can even type it into the search bar. And, if you want to, kill all the fanciness. Set it for best performance, right? Where it undoes all those checkboxes and everything when you're setting up. And then all that visual flair just disappears. And your machine will run like a dream. I love doing that because I like my Windows. If I have to use Windows, I like it looking like Windows 2000. Okay. So I always kill all of those, all of that different fanciness, because who the fuck needs it, So that's another thing that you can do as well on a personal level with an older machine. Okay, so remember that. Install it on top of Windows 7 first. Later on, if you want to do a clean install, go ahead. But I would do it on top of Windows 7 first. And actually, I think you have to. I think the process says that. But again, once Windows 10 is attached to that machine, you can do clean installs all day long, and you might as well. So that's fine. And then, run that PowerShell script if you want to clean it up. And if there is a performance hit of any kind, or you feel like you're not getting the performance you want, it's not going fast enough, I would turn off a lot of the fanciness in Windows 10, which is still totally possible. You really can make it look like Windows 2000. It's pretty amazing. And you don't need to install any special software to do that. It's just features that are built into Windows and have always been built into Windows, right? Like how you set it for high contrast and all these other things. Theming it out with what is already there, I think is a great idea. So, all right, let's get on to the next question here. And then we'll wrap things up with an interesting album of the week. So this is a short one. Very, very simple question, man of tomorrow. Is there a right way to do a smartphone? You mean like fuck it? Like, I don't get it. No, I know you don't mean that. Is there a right way to do a smartphone? I guess you're saying because we've been shitting pretty hard. I mean, I think I've almost always been shitting on smartphones throughout Sovereign Tech's history. Not always. I was a little kinder early on in the show's history, but when you've been doing something for almost a decade, things change. Just like smartphones have changed dramatically from what they were. Is there a right way to do a smartphone? I guess you mean, is there like a privacy-centric way? I'm going to guess that's what you're saying, of doing a smartphone, or a secure way of doing a smartphone. I mean, you can buy phones. They're usually not smartphones. I mean, like there's, well, let's call it, there's cartels, there's varying, we could be kind about it and call them activist groups, but that's being a little kind for some of them. There's people who are really, really hardcore about their, communications and them not being looked at by anybody. They do not buy smartphones, right? They buy old Nokia phones, and they have basically special antennas and networks that they're running through that they use to communicate with and all that. And these things cost a pretty penny. It is a look into just how far you have to go to have something that could even remotely be considered genuinely secure communications. But I would argue that the smartphone as we know it, as we use it, and why they are so popular, can you do those and be privacy respecting and genuinely secure, as in there isn't identifying metadata going out? Among other things, I mean, no platform is 100% perfect on being secure from, I mean, even OpenBSD ran into its one problem, right? 100% secure from any, kind of attack. Okay. So I'm not going to go like that far, but even just to where like all of your metadata would be anonymous and, and all of this. No, I don't think there is. And I know I'm probably going to get some shit for saying that, but okay, let me rephrase. Yes. Let me put it this way to you. Let me put it to you this way first. Yes, there is a way to do that. Okay. But here's what you have to understand. And this is true not just for smartphones. This is also true for computers, for laptops, whatever. A smartphone. I've said this about computers many times. There is no such thing as a $200 computer. There are $600 computers with $400 worth of adware on them. Okay. Even Chromebooks are, those you say, well, yeah, but I can buy a Chromebook for $160. There's a reason that, I mean, you say, well, Chrome OS is effectively free. Yeah, I mean, sure, you expect very shitty keyboard, which you get, very shitty build quality, which you get. I mean, all of that is true for even a $200 Chromebook. Okay. But believe me that Google doesn't make Chrome OS effectively for free and not make money off of it. No, they make a shit ton of money off of it because they're doing what? They're collecting such and so much data. They are, baking you into Chrome's or Google's ecosystem, and they hope to make money off of you from that in whatever form or fashion. I mean, they don't even have to put the adware or the data collection in Chrome OS itself because it's already in Chrome, the web browser, Google Docs, go down the Google, YouTube, go down the Google service. Okay? So that point that there is no such thing as, basically what I'm saying is there should be no computer, laptop, whatever, that's cheaper than $600. Okay? If it is cheaper than $600, it's because it's loaded with a bunch, it's basically subsidized by a bunch of really what I think is malware, but what you would call ad tech or, whatever. Okay, like ad stuff, kind of like what happened with, was that Superfish that was on Lenovo computers that was feeding ads? And yeah, that's how Lenovo was able to sell you a $230 IdeaPad, right? Because it was subsidized by all that ad tech from other companies. Anyway, the same is true And I think people are starting to realize this. But the same is ultimately true for smartphones. Okay? Where your smartphone that you spend, I don't know, from Nokia, that somehow only costs $100, right? Even like these Nokia Go phones or whatever, or these Android Go phones, that only cost that much. Yes, it has lower end hardware that makes it viable to be at that price. But let's be clear here. Your average smartphone really should cost. It's fun. What smartphones really should cost would make what the iPhone costs seem cheap. And we're talking, iPhones sell for over, $1,000, right? Part of why, I still think Apple engages in data collection and keeps it, they don't just trash it. Part of why, iPhones cost so much is because supposedly they are not injecting a shit ton of ad tech or other things into it. Okay, that all of that data and metadata is not a part of the program. And somewhere in there, there's some truth to that, but I don't think it's as hardcore or as true as Apple would like you to believe. Okay? Basically, smartphones, while the technology, memory does get cheaper and all this, yes, that does occur. That does lower the price to some degree. Ultimately, smartphones are only viable as we have them, where everybody, even a homeless person can own a smartphone. All of these things are only viable because of various subsidies, whatever shape that takes, be it what the manufacturers collect, the smartphone manufacturers collecting, what the government's collecting, even what whatever Google's collecting. Pick your third party, or again, even the manufacturer itself. Okay, that's what makes that's what allows their costs to be so low. And this is where it gets to the next point. That is all the things that you have found a smartphone to be ultimately indispensable for. Not all, but most. Those are only viable. Like these apps that you can install completely for free, or you only pay a couple bucks. Those are only viable at those prices. Again, where it's affordable for everybody, and it creates this infrastructure where it even becomes like it's this vicious cycle. For the infrastructure to exist for, whatever food delivery service you get, to work, is that everybody has it installed, and everybody having it installed is paid for by the fact that the data that the food service collects gets sold off to restaurants or advertisers or whatever. Like there's just this vicious cycle of what makes all of this able to get accessed by everybody. And if it's not accessed by everybody, it's not viable in the first place. Okay, do you get what I'm saying here? There's a reason software used to cost hundreds of dollars, and that's because all a company could do was sell you software. And this was even before, the internet was pervasive, right? Okay, so even though I think Adobe, Photoshop costing thousands of dollars is just preposterous, there was a time where, you could make an economic argument for why it cost that much, because Adobe couldn't collect data about its users. Okay. They might even have to mail you updates, and they had to pay their people, so you had to buy the software, and that was it. That's the landed price. You had no choice. There was no subsidizing to be had. None, because computers weren't connected to the internet. You literally could not send data to Adobe for them to sell off to advertisers or whoever else to make it worthwhile to them. You couldn't. It wasn't possible. Talk about cord cutting. There's no cord. You understand? So for things to cost what they cost, it inherently requires that data gets collected. Data, metadata, whatever, gets collected about you and gets sold off to somebody. And that's why half of these apps can even exist. And certainly why they can exist for free. Or even for only $1.99 or $4.99 or something like that. No, the smartphone as you understand it cannot exist ethically, cannot exist in a privacy respecting fashion. It's just not possible. Now, if you just want a phone that can maybe, that might have a web browser on it, and even that creates issues, right? you know, or the ugly incentives around what web pages do. You know, I mean, the ads that you get, just insane. Okay, that maybe has a web browser on it. Maybe has, I don't know, something like Telegram, you know, some kind of chat app on there, and that can make phone calls, you know, something like that. Yeah, that sort of thing could certainly exist. Okay, and you could anonymize all the data around it. But again, for that kind of device, believe it or not, and you could say, well, I can buy a feature phone that could basically do that. Sure, but then doesn't that speak to the point that that's not really a smartphone, right? Yeah, a smartphone, you know, having the GPS in it and having like a map app that comes built into it and all, I mean, all of this would cost crazy amounts of money for you to have that didn't, you know, again, that wasn't subsidized by data about you. Okay. Even if it anonymized the data, I mean, without it attaching to you and a way to like schlep ads off to you, it's not going to fly. Okay. And to say nothing of the fact, I mean, that all of this, you know, the smartphone, I mean, blockchain for a little while kind of kept the tech bubble from bursting, right? Because that was supposed to burst, 5 years ago, somewhere around there. But blockchain kind of kept that from happening. And the tech bubble from bursting, I mean, it really doubled down on it. But, how to put this? Nobody wants to realize, okay, that the economy that exists around smartphones is a fiction, right? Like that the cost of all of these things comes from a lack of privacy and, frankly, a lack of security, both of which are really, really terrible things. Okay, and especially the privacy part certainly, creates issues with human health, you know, conduciveness to the human condition. Nobody wants to realize that it's all bullshit, and that like you can't take. I mean, security researchers are ultimately full of themselves when they basically suggest, well, no, this is how you do things right on a smartphone. No, you can't. You can barely have a smartphone. I mean, you're going to end up effectively with a feature phone once you cut away at all these problems. I mean, because you're going to run into the problems. Again, it's not even just about the data and metadata. You run into the issues that suddenly there's whole swaths of the economy that aren't making money anymore. And that's going to create entire issues. You know, it's like when people think a little too, and the point I was going to make earlier is that like the app boom also staved off the tech bubble from bursting, right? That was what I was going to say earlier. But, and then blockchain did it for a little while, but then people realized that outside of Bitcoin, there's not a whole lot of like actual usefulness in reality with blockchain, right? I mean, there are things, but most of those don't have anything to do with money. It's just a clever way to store and share data, right? Which is a completely different thing. Basically, though, I mean, I see it very much like money. I mean, if you think too hard, and Bitcoin did this for a lot of people, right? I mean, this got a lot of people to start thinking about the very nature of money. And as far as money goes and the interconnected world that we live in, I mean, Bitcoin is a great thing. I will take nothing away from it. It is one of the finest technologies that we've ever developed within the infrastructure that we live in. No argument for me on that. Okay, but it did get people to think about money, right? And what is the nature of money? What is the reality around money? And the reality is there is no reality around it, right? Money is a fiction. It's a shared story that we have, but it is ultimately a fiction. And I think that's why a lot of people were resistant to Bitcoin, okay, was because it brought it. Look, I'm not saying that within the concept of money that Bitcoin, I just told you, it's one of the greatest things we've ever come up with, okay, within this concept. It has intrinsic value in the network itself, in the fact that it is the money and transmitter at the same time. It has far more intrinsic value than I dare say any money out there. Okay, if intrinsic value is a thing. But then, keep chipping away at all this And this is why I think that there were so many people who just wanted to make fun of Bitcoin, didn't like the concept of Bitcoin, because it effectively, when it gets you thinking about money and the nature of money and what makes quote unquote real money, is that it's all bullshit. Okay? And I think very much with smartphones, it's kind of the same deal. Like, there's no real way to, like the question asked, there's no real way to make a smartphone that respects your privacy and that is even remotely secure. And remember, as we've said on Sovereign Tech, this is kind of one of our axioms, if you want to go with that, what I used to call DApps, which has nothing to do with horse shit like Ethereum. Okay, DApps, decentralization, anonymity, privacy, and security. Okay, that's DApps. All of those to have something that fits in with, and the biggest one in there is privacy, because that's the one that affects human health in a very real way, right? You got to have all those things, though, to be able to pull off privacy, right? While privacy and security are two separate concepts, just like in the word DApps, or just like in the acronym DApps, you can't have one without the other. Not really, okay? And this is where, I think a lot of privacy advocates, they ultimately, and in some ways I do too, to make that money, right? They ultimately have to pay some kind of fealty, or they can't go all the way, and they kind of meet you middle in the road, which is, of course, a terrible place to be driving because you're guaranteed to get hit by somebody. But yeah, with the smartphone, no, there's no way to do it right. There is no way to do it absolutely right. And not just absolutely right as in a way that's impossible. Oh, no. It's possible, but you're just not going to end up with a smartphone. Okay. I talked about, hundreds of episodes ago. And I've talked about this at other places too. Like, you have Identity Mixer and things like this. Where'd it go? I think there's value in having a secondary authentication device. You understand? I haven't listened to it yet. I recommend that we all listen to it. But Steve Gibson did do his major presentation at the Twit Studios, or now they're called the LastPass Studios, but at Twit, he did his major presentation of Squirrel. Squirrel is out there. Okay, SQRL, it's out there. It exists. I've said for a while that what made Squirrel really possible, okay, was the fact that, you have a second device where you could do like these QR code handshakes and everything. I think having a second hardware device for authentication with your other myriad devices is a great and wonderful thing. Okay, there are uses for having something like a smartphone, but then really it's not for being a smartphone. Okay. Like it's not for, even really playing games on it or doing all this other horse shit. And I've talked about this before, where you have something that you just carry with you. Whether it's like a YubiKey or who knows what. I've even theorized it in fictional episodes that I've done, where you have something, say that's on your wrist or whatever, that, again, it anonymizes your data. It does not identify you. It just simply verifies that you fit within, and I've given this example many times. If you want to go see a rated R movie, the movie theater doesn't have to know how old you, they don't have to know your birth date. They don't. All they need to know is, does this person, are they above the age of 16? That's all they have to know. There's very little data required. But what do they, when you buy tickets, say on the Regal app or on the AMC app or whatever, oh no, they want all the information about you to buy those tickets. They got to verify fucking everything. It's insane. So that's my point, is that we don't have to give all of that data. It's great to have something that can easily verify that. It'd be better to have a device that did that than it would to have a license, to prove that you are who you are. You just have a device that gives, but again, there's no money in collecting anonymous data. There's money still in making the movie and you qualifying to go see it, but there's no money in the data, and so much of this stuff is propped up by collecting so much data about you, but then you can't really be private, nor can you really be secure in your persons with that. Do you see how this is all, it's just not possible? There's things you can do, but it would not look like a smartphone at the end of the day. Okay, and I think they are things that are worthwhile to do. I think that there are sectors within tech that have yet to be, I mean, that like there's little ideas within it, like even something as simple as a YubiKey or whatever. Okay, there are sectors within tech that have yet to be really explored, concepts that have yet to be really explored, but I don't think they'll ever be explored because people are just so hooked on the heroin that is data and metadata that comes from the smartphone economy specifically. And so I don't think we're ever going to get away from it. You know, really. I mean, even, you know, go to events that are supposedly all about, you know, personal liberty or liberty and all this other stuff. And they're probably telling you download the Eventbrite app or download this. And that way you can have a full, you know, okay. All right. Not being, again, they're a sponsor. Okay. And my sponsors know the score. And I have said this at Free State Project events, that it's crazy when you're about freedom and you're using Facebook and specifically the feature of Facebook events to coordinate things for the Free State Project, which it's like, wait, what? You know, what are you doing? Don't you realize Facebook is as statist as you could get? And anyway, you know, I mean, I've brought this stuff up, you know, and some people listen and they want to do things about it and others don't. And, you know, I mean, that's the beauty of organizations where you can have people with different ideas. But I'm just saying that, yeah, people, no one's going to be willing. They are afraid of what it looks like when you do. And this could get into a big subject and it's interesting that I brought up the subject of money. I think it's a Ben Franklin quote. Maybe it got misattributed to him or what, I don't know. But whoever the fuck said it, okay, I think it's a brilliant quote to bring up. Now, I am not saying that money is inherently an evil thing, okay? Even the Bible doesn't say that, right? The Bible says the love of money is a problem. Sure, and I get that point, okay? Having let's not call it money, having a medium of exchange, all right, is not an inherently evil thing. It is not inherently an unethical or bad thing. Okay. But that said, there's a great quote from I think it's from Ben Franklin, where he says, the only person afraid of a world without money is a scoundrel, because they are afraid that then people will realize they're not worth anything. And I think that's such a great point to bring up. And I think for a lot of people, I mean, yeah, there's people who are genuinely scared of like a world without money. Well, fuck, I'm going to starve, or I'm not going to be able to do this, or I'm not going to be able to do this, or whatever. But ultimately, I think there's a lot of truth to take away from that quote. You know, that the only person afraid of a world without money is a scoundrel. And we got to think about that. Because even if you live in a world where money is a thing, where a medium of exchange that is commonly accepted is a thing, you still want to be the best human being you can be, right? And I think we should all be pretty honest with ourselves that our bank account is in no way a gauge of, I mean, even Ayn Rand would say that. You know, success is no guarantee of virtue. That's an Ayn Rand quote. You know, Miss Business, and, you know, I mean, she put the money symbol on or the dollar symbol on fucking everything she did. Are you kidding? And she's even telling you, you know, a person of worth, it has nothing to do with their bank account. It has nothing to do with how many businesses they've made or anything like that. Like it has everything to do with, are they an ethical human being? Are they consistent? Are they blah, blah, blah? And I think too many humans are just terrified of, you know, what things would be like without financial incentive and so on. And yeah, look, the world would be very different. It would be a very different place. And yep, there probably wouldn't be smartphones because they wouldn't be, like, the infrastructure literally could not sustain itself. It couldn't. Would there be an internet? That's an even better question. Now, I've already gone long, so I'm not going to go there. But that's a great question to ask. Is there a way to do the internet where it is privacy respecting and, and so on. I think some people would say there's a very simple answer to that. Some people might want to point at Tor and say, well, clearly it can. But like we've talked about recently, how is Tor getting a lot of its money? What did it take for it to get to the point where it could even be even remotely self-sustaining? Is it actually self-sustaining? Could you attach it to blockchain of some kind? Like, people have tried Torcoin, all kinds of things. That's a big question to ask too. But again, I'm not going to get into that. If you really want me to talk about it, you're going to have to ask me. So we'll leave it at that. Let's get into our album of the week. Okay. But I guess ultimately, no, you would not have something like a smartphone because almost no one could afford it. And if nobody can afford it, it doesn't have the network effect. And so it wouldn't have the usefulness, the extreme usefulness, that it has. So anyway, let's get into our album of the week. Got an interesting one here that, it's not that good. And I hate to say that. It's by The Dark Element. Okay. They had an album come out in 2017 that I didn't actually think was too bad. I liked Dark Element's first album, which was self-titled The Dark Element. The Dark Element is a little kind of a supergroup that Annette Olson, who was the original replacement for Tarja. Is that how you say that right? Tarja? For Tarja out of Turunen, if I'm saying her name wrong, I'm sorry. From Nightwish. Okay. And one of my favorite Nightwish albums, that being Dark Passion Play, is the one that Annette Olson was on. Now, was it Fleur Jansen or whatever her name is? She is involved, or she's the lead singer now. Annette Olson left. I don't know what exactly happened there. I thought Annette Olson was a great, injection of energy and youth into what the band was doing, even though the band wasn't necessarily that old at the time. But anyway, Annette Olson spun out. She's done her own thing. I think she did like some solo work. I remember there was some song about sunshine or some shit that I remember her doing. But The Dark Element is something that she's on. And in fact, with this album, which just came out in the past month, I think it was, Songs the Night Sings. That's the album title, Songs the Night Sings. They even put her name on the cover of it, probably because the first Dark Element album didn't sell very well. I feel like the production level's a little odd on this. There's some okay songs, but all of it just really feels okay. And Annette Olson has, a damn fine voice with great range. And I don't know. I found this disappointing. And it's a pity because, again, the work she did with Nightwish was top notch. In fact, I can't really even think of anybody that has a voice quite like her. I think Fleur Jansen, I think she does, she does a fine job with the music. I've seen we've heard her albums now. We've seen her live. I haven't seen her live, but I've seen live performances, on DVD and YouTube. But I don't know. Annette Olson had a very unique voice to her, and obviously nobody sings like Tarja. I'm not gonna take anything away from her at all. But even though Tarja's newer albums have been not there in my opinion. So anyway, this is one. You could check it out if you liked Nightwish at all, or if you Annette Olson's voice is great, but this is not necessarily the best showcase. 2019 has been a great year. There have been albums from people that I just didn't expect, but it also has shown, Airborne did not have a good album in 2019. Really disappointed by that Santa Cruz album. That was really disappointing that came out. Dark Element is another one where, I haven't felt it. When in the same breath, as both Ellen and I have attested to, some of the best albums ever have come out this year. So it's a little disappointing that this one wasn't that strong. Again, the production just didn't really seem to be there. I don't know what exactly was, or maybe there wasn't a great hook in any of the songs and it just didn't pull me in. But it's not bad. It certainly got me through a gym session. I can say that much. So anyway, The Dark Element, Songs the Night Sings. I can't imagine this has done well in sales, or that it's given confidence that there would be a third album. I think Annette Olson would be better off just, slapping her name just doing, just doing solo work. I really think that would be the best thing. But, what do I know? I mean, I'm a musician, I've made albums, I've sold albums, but, I'm certainly not in these levels. So I guess, anyway, this is an area where, I don't necessarily have the most expertise other than my history and knowledge of metal itself. So we'll leave it at that. I don't want to tell people what to do, but just my opinion. If I saw Annette Olson, I'd be all over it. I mean, female singers, like, that's a big thing now. Even on sites that you go to where you can download this stuff, maybe for free, will often put in, parens, they'll put female vox, right? Meaning that it has a female vocalist, because that will get more people to download. And I don't mean it'll get women to download it. I mean, I'm sure it will, but I mean, it'll get more men to download it. I am far more amenable to, especially if it's a band name I don't know or is kind of untried. Like if Brides of Destruction. I mean, granted, I listened to them because of Nikki Sixx, but if Brides of Destruction was coming out with a new album and they mentioned that they had a female singer, I would download that. As to where, them, otherwise I might not have. You get what I'm saying? So, yeah, if I were Annette Olson, I'd drop the band name and just run the solo stuff. So anyway, even though, like I said, what do I know? All right, that's it for this Wednesday Q&A. We'll wrap this baby up. More Sovereign Tech to come, and many more things to come in 2020. Well, why spoil the surprise? I will see all of you, on the other side.